Well now, pull up a chair, dear. Yes, you. I've got a story for you, one I've kept locked away in this old heart for more years than I can rightly count. You think you know pain? You think you know betrayal? Honey, you stick with me until the end, because what that man did, and what my own mother, well, what she didn't do, it'll leave you speechless. I swear on my grave it will. And let me tell you, if you enjoy stories that lay bare the human heart, the good, the bad, and the downright unbelievable, you might want to hit that like button and subscribe, because this old gal has seen a thing or two. It all started so innocently, if you can believe it. I was just a little slip of a girl, happy as a clam at high tide. But then he came along, and everything changed. You see, I always thought my mother, Martha, was my rock, my safe harbor. Lord have mercy. I never imagined she'd stand by and watch my world crumble. Or worse, help sweep the pieces under the rug. But that's not even half of it. What I eventually found out, well, it changed everything I thought I knew about my own blood. You're not going to believe how this story ends, but I promise you, it's the God's honest truth. Back in my day, life was simpler, or so they say. For me, in the little town of Harmony Creek, it truly was, for a spell. I remember sunshine spilling through the lace curtains, the smell of Mama's apple pie. That was Martha, my mama, and the feel of her hand in mine as we walked to the little white church on Sundays. My daddy, he'd passed when I was just a babe, so it was always just me and Mama. We weren't rich, not by a long shot, but we had love, or so I believed. We had a little house, a garden out back where I'd chase butterflies, and a sense of peace that felt as steady as the oak tree in our yard. I was a happy child, content with my rag doll, Betsy, and the stories Mama would read to me before bed. Oh, how I cherished those moments, tucked in safe and sound. Little did I know a storm was brewing on the horizon, a storm named Arthur Pendleton. He blew into our lives like a smooth-talking salesman, with a suitcase full of promises, and a smile that could charm the birds from the trees. Mama. She was lonely, I see that now. She was still young, pretty, with a sadness in her eyes that I, as a child, couldn't quite understand. Arthur, he saw that sadness, and like a wolf in sheep's clothing, he preyed on it. He'd bring her flowers, whisper sweet nothings, paint pictures of a future filled with laughter and security. I was about 8 years old then, and at first, I admit, I was taken with him too. He'd swing me around, call me Princess Alara, and sneak me peppermints when Mama wasn't looking. He seemed like the answer to a prayer we hadn't even dared to whisper. Lord, how wrong we were, or how wrong I was. Maybe Mama knew something all along. What do you think? Could she have seen the darkness lurking behind those charming eyes even then? The wedding was a small affair. Mama looked beautiful, but there was a shadow in her eyes that day, a flicker of something I couldn't name. I remember thinking it was just wedding day nerves. Soon after, Arthur moved in, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the sunshine in our little house began to dim. His Princess Alara pet name started to sound less like affection and more like a brand. The peppermints stopped. His smiles became rarer, reserved mostly for when Mama was around. When it was just him and me, his eyes would turn cold, calculating. It started with little things. Alara, your voice is too loud. Alara, sit. Still, you're like a flea in a hot skillet. Alara, don't you dare look at me that way. His voice, once so smooth, now had a cutting edge to it, a tone that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I tried telling Mama. Mama, I'd whisper. Arthur scares me. He's not nice when you're not here. But she'd just sigh, that tired sigh that was becoming all too familiar. Now, Alara, she'd say, her voice gentle but firm. "Arthur is your new father. He's just trying to help you be a good girl. You need to listen to him. He provides for us, you know. We have to be grateful." Grateful? I was terrified. Was this what a father was supposed to be like? A man whose footsteps echoing down the hall could make your heart hammer in your chest? A man whose very presence sucked the air out of a room? The verbal jabs soon turned into something more. A harsh grab of the arm that left bruises. A push that sent me sprawling. A slap across the face for some imagined slight, like spilling my milk or humming too loudly. And through it all, Mama. Mama was a ghost. She'd either be conveniently out of the room, or she'd witness it, her face pale, and then later she'd tell me, "You must have done something to provoke him, Alara. Try to be better. Provoke him. I was a child. I was just existing." Each time she said something like that, a little piece of my heart chipped away. The mother I knew, the one who smelled of apple pie and sunshine, was disappearing, replaced by this frightened, distant woman, who seemed more loyal to this monster than to her own daughter. You won't believe what she said next. One time when he'd locked me in the pantry for an hour for tracking mud into the kitchen. When he finally let me out, sobbing and shaking, she just looked at me and said, "Well, perhaps now you'll learn to wipe your feet." Lord have mercy. The coldness in her voice cut deeper than any of Arthur's blows. But the worst part, the part that still makes my blood run cold even after all these decades, was the look in Arthur's eyes. It was a look of enjoyment. He liked seeing me scared. He liked having that power. And Mama? She just let him. Why, Mama, why? That question haunted my childhood, my young adulthood, and, well, most of my life. I tried to be invisible, to make myself small, to anticipate his moods. But it was no use. His anger was a capricious beast, striking without warning. And Mama's silence, her refusal to protect me, was a constant, aching betrayal. One evening, I remember it clear as day. I was supposed to be in bed, but I'd crept out, thirsty. The floorboards creaked, as they always did, but I was light on, my feet, like a little mouse. I heard them talking in the parlor, their voices low. Arthur's was sharp, insistent. Mama's was pleading? I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard him say something about owing him and keeping quiet for everyone's sake. Then I heard Mama whimper, "But the child, she's just a child." Arthur's voice dropped to a growl. "She's part of the deal, Martha. Don't you forget it." Part of what deal? What did he mean? My blood ran cold. I scurried back to bed, my mind racing. What deal? What did I have to do with it? A few days later I was snooping, as terrified children sometimes do, looking for answers, for anything that might make sense of the nightmare my life had become. I found Arthur's roll-top desk unlocked, which was rare. My heart was pounding, like a drum. Tucked away in a back compartment, almost hidden, was a small leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a diary, not exactly. It was filled with names I didn't recognize, dates, and strange little sums of money listed next to them. Some names were crossed out. My childish mind couldn't make heads or tails of it, but there was an air of menace about that little book. One name, Eleanor Vance, was circled several times, with question marks beside it. And next to one of the entries, scribbled in the margin, was a single, chilling word: liability. I didn't know what it meant then, not really, but the way it was written, harsh and final, sent a shiver down my spine. I slammed the notebook, shut, my hands shaking. What had I stumbled upon? And what, or who, was Eleanor Vance? That night, I dreamt of dark secrets and whispers in the shadows, and I knew, deep in my bones, that this was far from over. In fact, It felt like it was just the beginning of something even more terrifying. After finding that little notebook, a new kind of fear took root in me. It wasn't just the fear of Arthur's rages anymore, but a deeper, colder dread about what secrets he and Mama were keeping. That name, Eleanor Vance, it echoed in my head. Who was she? And why did Arthur seem so fixated on her? If you think discovering that notebook was a shock, well, hold on to your hats, because things were about to get a whole lot uglier. Remember, if you're finding this story as gripping as it was for me to live through, a little tap on that like button would mean the world to this old storyteller. The abuse, well, it didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Arthur seemed to be under some kind of pressure, his moods blacker than a crow's wing. He'd pace the house like a caged tiger, muttering to himself, and any little thing would set him off. A crooked picture on the wall, a speck of dust on the mantelpiece, the sound of my breathing if he thought it was too loud. And Mama, oh Mama. She just retreated further into herself. Her eyes were always red-rimmed. Her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it pity, fear, or something else entirely? What would you do, I often wondered, if you were in my shoes with a mother who looked right through your pain? I tried to get help, I really did. Back in my day, you didn't just call up child services, not in a small town like Harmony Creek where everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. But I tried. I hinted to my school teacher, Miss Perkins, a kind woman with gentle eyes. I'd linger after class, my stomach in knots. Miss Perkins, I'd say, my voice barely a whisper. Sometimes things aren't good at home. She'd pat my hand and say, Now, Ilara, every family has its ups and downs. I'm sure your mother and Mr. Pendleton love you very much. Love? Was this love? Her words, meant to comfort, felt like another betrayal. No one wanted to see, or maybe they just couldn't believe that a man as outwardly respectable as Arthur Pendleton, a man who donated to the church bake sale and tipped his hat to the ladies on Main Street, could be a monster behind closed doors. My only escape was the local library. Old Miss Abigail, the librarian, she never asked too many questions. She just let me sit among the books for hours, losing myself in stories of faraway lands and brave heroines. It was there, surrounded by the smell of old paper and ink, that I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark of defiance. I started reading, everything I could get my hands on, learning about the world beyond Harmony Creek. I dreamt of escape, of a life where I wasn't constantly walking on eggshells. One night, the fightin' between Mama and Arthur was worse than usual. Their voices were loud, angrier than I'd ever heard. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart hammerin'. This time, I could hear more clearly. You can't keep this up, Arthur, Mama cried, her voice raw with anguish. The agreement was for protection, not this. What about her inheritance? You promised. Inheritance? My ears perked up. What inheritance? Arthur's voice was a low snarl. The agreement, Martha, was that I take care of things. And that includes keeping her in line and our little secret safe. Don't you dare forget what I know about your sister, about what really happened to Eleanor. Eleanor, there was that name again. My sister. Mama had a sister named Eleanor? My mind reeled. Mama had always told me she was an only child. Lord have mercy. The lies were piling up higher than a haystack. He continued, That inheritance is tied up, and it'll stay that way until I say so. And as for the girl, she needs to learn her place, just like you learned yours. There was a sickening thud, followed by Mama's sharp cry of pain. That was the last straw. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't live like this, watching Mama suffer, endure his cruelty, and be haunted by these dark secrets. Was Mama a prisoner too? Was her coldness towards me a shield or a symptom of her own terror? The questions swirled in my head, making me dizzy. The next day, Mama had a bruise on her cheek that she tried to cover with powder. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Arthur was smug, triumphant, but I had a new resolve. I had to find out the truth. I had to know about Eleanor Vance, about this mysterious inheritance, and about the hold Arthur had over my mother. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the answers lay hidden somewhere in that house, maybe even connected to that strange little notebook. I started watching Arthur more closely, tracking his routines, trying to figure out where he might keep important papers. He was meticulous, almost obsessively so, about his study. He always kept it locked. But I noticed he had a habit of leaving his keys on the hall table when he came in from work, just for a few minutes while he took off his coat and hat. It was a long shot, a terrible risk. If he caught me, I didn't want to think about it. But the thought of living one more day in that suffocating silence, with those unspoken horrors hanging in the air, was even worse. I decided I would try to get into his study. I had to. I'd wait for my chance. And if I couldn't find anything there, well, I had another, more desperate plan forming in the back of my mind. I would run away. I'd take Betsy, my old rag doll, what little money I'd saved from doing, odd chores for neighbors, and I'd just go. Anywhere but here. But first, the study. I needed answers. What I didn't know was that the answers I was about to find would be more shocking, more devastating, than anything my young mind could have possibly imagined. And the secret they revealed? It would unravel my entire world. My plan to get into Arthur's study was foolhardy, I knew that. But desperation, dear, it makes you do brave, or perhaps just plain reckless things. You won't believe the nerve I had, a slip of a girl trying to outsmart a man like Arthur. But the thought of Mama's bruised face, the sound of her stifled sobs at night, and those chilling words about Eleanor and an inheritance, they fueled me. What would you have done? Would you have risked it? I swear on my grave, I felt like I had no other choice. For days I watched him, my heart in my throat every time he came through that front door. Then, one afternoon, my chance came. He came home early, seeming agitated, preoccupied. He tossed his keys on the hall table, grunted something at Mama, and stomped off towards the kitchen, probably demanding his supper. Mama was in the backyard, hanging laundry. It was now or never. My hands were sweating, my breath caught in my chest. With movements as silent as a whisper, I snatched the keyring. My fingers fumbled, finding the small, ornate key I'd seen him use for the study. Lord have mercy. My heart was beaten like a trapped bird against my ribs. I slipped into the study, the air thick with the smell of his tobacco and old paper. The room was dark, curtains drawn. I went straight for his roll-top desk. Locked, of course. But this time, I had the key. It slid into the lock, turned with a soft click. I held my breath, expecting him to burst in at any moment. Inside, it was a mess of ledgers, bills, and official-looking documents. I scanned them quickly, my eyes darting over names and figures, looking for Eleanor Vance or any mention of an inheritance. Nothing jumped out at me immediately. But then, tucked beneath a heavy ledger, I saw it. That same small, leather-bound notebook I'd found before. My fingers trembled as I opened it. More names, more numbers. But this time, as I flipped through, a loose photograph fell out. It was a picture of a woman, young and smiling, with eyes so like my own it made me gasp. On the back, scribbled in faded ink, was a single word: Eleanor. My head was spinning. This Eleanor, the woman in the photograph, She looked so much like me. Could she be a relative? Before I could process it, I heard Arthur's heavy footsteps in the hall. Panic seized me. I shoved the notebook and photo back, slammed the desk, shut, locked it, and scrambled for the door, aiming to replace the keys. But I was too slow. The study door creaked open, and there he stood, his face a mask of cold fury. "What?" he hissed, his voice dangerously low. "Do you think you're doing—" "In here, you little sneak!" He advanced on me, and I backed away, terrified. I was just looking for a pencil," I stammered, the lie flimsy even to my own ears. His eyes narrowed. "A pencil? In my private desk?" He knew. He knew I was lying. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in like talons. "You've been snooping, haven't you? Nosing around where you don't belong." I braced myself for the blow, for the pain that was sure to follow. But then, something happened that I never, ever expected. "Arthur, stop it. Leave her alone." It was Mama's voice, but not the timid, frightened voice I was used to. This voice was strong, fierce, filled with a protective fury I'd never heard from her before. She stood in the doorway, her face pale but resolute, her hands clenched into fists. Arthur turned, momentarily surprised. "Martha, what is the meaning of this? Get back to the kitchen." But Mama stood her ground. "No," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. "Not this time, Arthur, not anymore." He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Oh, really? And what are you going to do about it, Martha? You forget who holds all the cards here. You forget what I can do." He took a step towards her menacingly. "I can ruin you. I can ruin her." Mama didn't flinch. "I don't care anymore," she whispered. Then her voice rose. "You want to talk about secrets, Arthur. Fine. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about Eleanor. Let's talk about why you're really here." Arthur's face went white. "You wouldn't dare," he growled. "Oh, wouldn't I?" Mama shot back, a wild look in her eyes. "You think I'll let you destroy another life because of your greed and your twisted games? You think I'll stand by while you terrorize this child, my sister's child? My sister's child?" The words hit me like a physical blow. My head swam. Mama wasn't my mama. Eleanor Vance was my mother, and Martha was my aunt. The room seemed to tilt. All these years I'd believed. Arthur looked stunned, then his face contorted with rage. "You foolish woman, you'll regret this." He raised his hand as if to strike her, and that's when I found my voice, a scream torn from the very depths of my soul. "No!" I threw myself in front of Mama, or rather, my Aunt Martha. Arthur froze, his hand hovering in midair. The three of us stood there, locked in a terrifying tableau, the air crackling with unspoken truths and years of suppressed pain. And then Martha, my aunt. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and then back at Arthur, her eyes blazing. "It's over, Arthur," she choked out. "I'm going to tell her everything. Everything you did. Everything I let you do. And then, God help me, I'm going to make this right." The silence that followed was deafening, pregnant with the weight of impending revelation. What she was about to say, I knew, would change our lives forever. But was it too late? And what other horrors was she about to unearth? Lord have mercy, standing there in that dusty study, with Arthur looking like a cornered wolf and my Aunt Martha. Well, suddenly she wasn't the timid mouse I'd known. She was a lioness, ready to defend her cub, even if that cub was me, and even if it was years too late. The air was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, Maybe drop a comment and tell me if you ever had a moment where everything you believed turned out to be a lie. It's a shock to the system, I tell you. And hey, if these kinds of real-life dramas get your heart pumping, don't forget to subscribe for more stories from this old soul. Arthur was sputtering, trying to regain control. Martha, you don't know what you're saying. You'll destroy everything. But Martha, she just shook her head, tears still flowing, but her gaze steady on me. No, Arthur. You destroyed everything, a long time ago. Ilara, honey, she began, her voice thick with emotion. There's so much you don't know, so much I should have told you, should have protected you from. And then, the story came tumbling out, a torrent of heartbreak and betrayal. Eleanor Vance, the woman in the photograph, the woman whose eyes mirrored my own, she was indeed my birth mother, Martha's younger sister. My real father had died young, leaving my mother Eleanor in a terrible bind, entangled with some very dangerous people because of debts he'd incurred. Arthur, it turned out, wasn't just some charming suitor who'd swept Martha off her feet. Oh no, he was one of them, an associate of those dangerous people sent to collect, or worse, to exact some kind of revenge on Eleanor. He was a viper, plain and simple. Eleanor, terrified for my safety, had made a desperate deal. She'd disappeared, gone into hiding, leaving me, a tiny babe, in Martha's care. She also left a small inheritance for me, entrusted to Martha, hoping it would give me a start in life when I came of age. Arthur found out. He tracked Martha down. He threatened her, threatened to expose Eleanor's whereabouts, threatened to harm me if Martha didn't comply. His price for silence and my safety? Martha had to marry him, pretend I was her child, and give him control over her life, and by extension mine. And the inheritance? He wanted that too. But it was tied up legally in a way he couldn't easily access, not until I was older. So he bided his time, making their lives a livin' hell. The abuse, Martha explained through her sobs, was Arthur's way of keeping her subjugated, of punishing her for her sister's defiance, and well, he was just a cruel, sadistic man. Her silence, her seeming complicity in my suffering, it wasn't because she didn't love me. It was because she was paralyzed by fear, trapped in an impossible situation, trying to protect me from a far worse fate at Arthur's hands, or so she believed. She thought if I just endured, he might eventually leave us alone once he got what he wanted. I was a coward, Ilara, she wept. A terrible, weak coward. I thought I was protecting you, but I let him hurt you. Can you ever forgive me? Forgive her? My mind was a whirl. All those years of pain, of feeling unloved, abandoned by my own mother. It was all built on a foundation of fear and terrible secrets. Arthur, listening to all this, his face was a picture of sneering contempt. She'll never forgive you, Martha, he spat. And you've just signed your sister's death warrant. And as for you, you little brat. He started towards me again, his eyes glaring. But this time, something else happened. There was a loud knocking at the front door, then voices. Mr. Pendleton? This is Sheriff Brody. We've had a report of a disturbance. My heart leaped. You see, earlier that week, after that awful fight I'd overheard, I'd done something I'd never dared before. I'd snuck out and spoken to Mrs. Henderson, our kindly, sharp-eyed neighbor. I hadn't told her everything, just that I was scared, that Arthur was getting meaner. I'd asked her if she ever heard real loud screaming, to please call the sheriff. And bless her heart, she had. Arthur froze. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured balloon. Sheriff Brody was a big man, not easily intimidated. The sight of Mama's tear-streaked face, my own terrified expression, and Arthur's barely concealed rage told him enough. Things unraveled quickly for Arthur after that. with Martha's testimony and evidence from that little notebook, which, it turned out, detailed some of his shadier dealings and attempts to locate my mother, Eleanor, Arthur Pendleton was finally brought to justice. Not for all his crimes, mind you, but for enough of them to put him away for a good long stretch. We never saw him again. And that, as they say, was that. The aftermath. Well, it wasn't easy. Aunt Martha and I had a long road ahead. There was so much pain, so much lost time. But with Arthur gone, the truth out in the open, it was like a heavy shroud had been lifted from our home. We talked for hours, days, weeks. She told me about my mother, Eleanor, about her bravery, her love for me. We cried a lot. I learned that my mother, Eleanor, had indeed managed to stay hidden and safe, though she'd passed away from illness a few years before Arthur's downfall, never knowing if I was all right. That was a fresh wave of grief, but also a strange kind of peace, knowing she hadn't abandoned me by choice. Slowly, painstakingly, Aunt Martha and I began to rebuild our relationship, this time on a foundation of truth. The inheritance, it wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough for me to get a proper education, to leave Harmony Creek when I was old enough, and to build a life for myself, a life free from fear. I traveled. I learned. I even found love, a good, kind man who cherished me. We had children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren, a whole beautiful family tree that grew from a single scarred seedling. And Aunt Martha? She lived a long life, too. We found a way to forgive, to understand. She carried her guilt. I know she did. But she also found a measure of peace. She was a constant in my life, a true grandmother to my children. We never forgot what happened, but we didn't let it define us. So now, here I am, 103 years young. I've seen a century turn, seen the world change in ways you wouldn't believe, and I've learned that secrets, they fester like an old wound. It's the truth, no matter how painful, that sets you free. My life wasn't easy, not by a long shot, but it's been my life. And looking back, I wouldn't trade the wisdom I've gained for all the tea in China. It took a long, long time, but I found my happy ending. It wasn't the fairy tale kind, but it was real, and it was mine. So what do you think of my story? Would you have been able to forgive, in my shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you believe in the power of truth and resilience, and enjoy hearing these old tales from a life lived to the fullest, please do give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more. This old heart still has a few more stories to tell. Thank you for listening, dear. Thank you for letting me share.